We are. We hit record just as the tractor cutting the grass drives by. I don't think people will hear it. I don't think people hear it. Aaron, welcome, mate. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
I know you are an incredibly busy individual, but we managed to line it up, so I appreciate it very much. And the subject matter of this podcast, was completely new to me, or known to me until we met a couple of months back and had a brew. But coincidentally, I put a post on social media last night, on Instagram last night, said interviewed a guy this week. I outlined some of it, you know, coma, IC, intensive care psychosis.
Yep.
I said, can you imagine being in this situation? And then an ex-reg bloke actually popped up in the comments, and I knew he was really sick of the issue. I don't know what it was. I saw a post. I don't know him super well. We've met a couple of times in Arnhem. Funny enough, we were just talking about Arnhem off air, and he said, "Yeah, I experienced a very similar thing, or the same thing, the same condition earlier this year." I was like, "Fucking hell!"
Really?
Because it's so rare, is it not? So I don't know to what extent he did experience it.
You have got to hook us up.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah, I will
definitely.
Yeah, I will do. So, mate, right, you got the intensive care psychosis. But before we go on to that, Aaron, how did you end up in that situation in the first place? How did you end up in a coma in the first place, or severely sick? Start from wherever you want to start off to get this story, get this out there.
Okay, as you know, like you, ex-military, 3 active soda tours back in the day, not a scratch, or not a significant scratch. Gardening in Romford, I scratched the back of my hand, and when I say I scratched the back of my hand, I mean it was literally like a pinprick. And we were sat there in the garden.
You're out now. You're out of the military now.
Yeah. Sat there feeling flush with success. All alpha male, been chopping stuff up in the garden, and I had this kind of little, as you do, a little when you scratch yourself, it gets a little bit red or something like that. And I'm having a little bit of a scratch of it, as blokes like to do. And my girlfriend, now wife at the time, was like, leave that alone. You'll make it sore. And I went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night wanting to pee, switched the bathroom light on, and I looked down, and my right arm was twice the size of what it should be.
The whole arm?
Kind of from the elbow down. And I woke my wife up, and we sort of like, right, okay, we're going to hospital tomorrow. Lie down.
Was it discoloured? Was there any discoloration?
No.
Just inflamed?
Yeah.
Massive?
No pain.
Really?
No pain. And I was like, right, okay, lie down, and then immediately sat back and go, no, let's get down to the hospital. And we went, and we sat in intensive care, and they weren't taking it terribly seriously.
What? So you went straight into intensive care?
No, sorry, misspoke. Went straight to A&E.
A&E, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we went to A&E, and nothing really was happening. And then I started to go downhill, kind of medically. I started to feel sick. My arm started to ache. The swelling was getting worse. It started getting really red.
How long have you been in there for at this point?
God, if I'm honest, I don't even remember. I think probably a couple of hours. It's A&E, in late early hours. Eventually, we got taken through to triage. And I remember, they were kind of in and out, and we'll take your obs, yada yada yada. No one taking anything seriously, and then I just remember this whoosh of pain going down my arm, and it was I liken it to somebody pumping molten lead through my bloodstream. I didn't know it was humanly possible. I mean, I've broken pretty much every bone in my body, not in one sitting. I'm not that, in various situations, and I didn't know it was humanly possible to feel this level of pain. It was unfucking believable.
Out of the blue.
Yeah, and it just came down my arm, and the sweat just started pouring off.
While you were in sat in A&E waiting.
When I was sat, in triage waiting to go through, and they said, "Oh, we'll give you some." They came in and said, "Oh, we'll give you some codeine." Look at that! Bring the hard drugs on. And eventually gave me some Oromorph, which is liquid morphine, and that eased it for a few moments. And again, they didn't seem to be terribly worried about the situation, which was making me and my wife and Karen, my now wife, even more worried because they didn't seem to take this seriously, and I knew this was a serious thing. And then Karen said to me, "Should you pretend to faint? They'll start taking you seriously." And I'm like, "I'm not doing that." And then literally moments later, my eyes rolled back to white. I just went rigid, teeth clenched to the point I later found out I'd broken one of my teeth, and I just started violently convulsing. I mean, it was like something from a horror film, apparently. I was just violently convulsing on the bed, just as like somebody. If you ever seen someone have an epileptic fit, it was like that.
And this was from the pain, or just, or.
Well, what I didn't know until later, what had happened is the scratch in the garden, a bacteria called necrotizing fasciitis had got in there, which is the flesh-eating superbug. And what it does is it breaks down all the tissue, and as it breaks down the tissue, that releases loads of basically toxins. So I had sepsis.
Necrotizing
fasciitis.
Sounds horrendous.
Yeah. It's alternative name, the flesh-eating superbug, isn't that? They're not trying to sugarcoat this one, are they, really?
Was it the Daily Mail give it that name, Bailey Chan?
Very probably.
But they got it right in this instance.
Yeah. It's not hubris. It really fucking is. Anyway, I started convulsing. And then a little bit more action started to happen. And, I was taken down and they were looking at an amazing team was kind of assembled. But I was oblivious to this because I kept drifting in and out of consciousness and this was because of the pain. The pain would get that bad. My brain would basically say,
what were you thinking?
You've had enough.
When you were conscious, what were you thinking at this point, early on, before you knew what it was?
Make the fucking pain stop. It was just unbelievable. And, I knew I was gravely ill.
All over your body or just in the arm?
Not just my arm. And my arm at this point was like the size of my thigh. Like the skin was stretching. I kind of drifted in and out of loses consciousness, and an amazing orthopedic surgeon came over, and they said we want to do an ultrasound. They couldn't find a porter, so my wife basically grabbed the trolley, grabbed the nurse, and dragged me down to ultrasound.
Did they have any idea what it was at this point? Did they know about the cut in your hand?
Yeah, they'd seen that. But I mean, it was so tiny. I mean, it was literally a pinprick.
Yeah.
And it was camouflaged by the fact that my whole arm at this point was like red and, burning up. They took a scan, they took me back, and one of the surgeons who was on duty at the time, he ran a scalpel down my forearm. No prep, no anaesthetic, anything like that. Just run a blade, and it looked like it just billowed down. It looked like red sand just came pouring out, and the stench. I mean, I wasn't bothered about it because I was busy dying. Karen wasn't bothered about it because she was busy watching me die. But like the doctors and nurses around were sort of like trying not to bring up their lunch, and then.
So how come? So
it's basically rotting flesh.
But he was panicking about you piling in you, dying, which is why he made a decision to do that off the cuff and cut your arm.
I think he suspected, and he said the words necrotizing fasciitis, and my wife, I think it's his wife, she's now, Karen kind of looked at me and said, they said necrotizing fasciitis, and I looked at her and I said, I am really ill, aren't I? And I lost consciousness again, and I kind of came round. By the time I came round, I was just surrounded by people. There was like 2 doctors on each limb, and they were all desperately trying to get a line into me, because if they didn't get antibiotics in me, immediately I was dead. I'd gone too far. When
you say it was like sand coming out your arm, was like thick? You mean thick liquid out of where you cut it?
It just looked like if you got sand and you wet sand, that's just what it kind of looked like. I mean, maybe my eyes were a bit blurry through, but and I remember bits and pieces at this point. I remembered there was a consultant, and she was trying to because all my veins at this point are now collapsed. There's one of the surgeons, and she was up my feet, and they were trying to get a line in. They actually used a paediatric cannula, you know, what they use for babies. And I just heard her, we've got a line, we've got a line. And they couldn't give me any more painkillers because the priority was the antibiotics. If it's a choice between the antibiotics or the painkillers, well, the pain is not going to kill you. The toxins are. And I later found out that if I'd have got to A&E 20 minutes later, that I'd have been too far gone. And then,
Christ almighty.
Then at some point, I just remember somebody saying, crash theatres. And then everything kind of went dark, and that's when, excuse me, my journey began.
Flash to bang, what, 3 hours?
Well, yeah, from going into an A&E, probably.
If you'd
about
gone
that.
to sleep at home, you wouldn't have woken up.
Yeah, I always say thank God for my 70-year-old bladder. Had I been able to sleep through the night without getting up for a pee, I would. No, without a doubt, that wouldn't have happened. I would not have woken up because this bacteria would have basically just, because what it does is it shuts everything down so it can, do its thing.
How rare is this bacteria?
I always say it's everywhere but very rare. So the analogy I give is if you imagine you took a handful of glitter, like kids decorate cards with. So you take a handful of like multicolored glitter, you put it in your hand and you go in your garden on a windy day and you throw it in the air. You would not be able to find a grain of that, would you? It would be there, but it'd be very, very difficult to find. So necrotizing fasciitis is a little bit like that. It's kind of everywhere, but it's very, very rare, thankfully.
And then you have to get it into the bloodstream.
Yeah, which is, again, another difficult thing to do. Yeah, so just happened that, one of the thorns that I'd been cutting back or whatever it was, had it on, cut my hand, that stuck into my hand, and, that was the entry point.
And so is it only antibiotics can cure it? This isn't like a magic antidote type of thing. It's pump the antibiotics in. Hopefully they work quick because it got in your arm, right? And then what's this mechanism there? It basically gradually infects the rest of the body.
What it does is it will break down the necrotizing fasciitis.
Oh, is that scar on your arm from where they cut your arm open?
This is one of
Jesus.
Kind of 6 operations. I don't know whether the camera will pick it up, but it kind of goes from there. Oh,
you can see that. Yeah, you can see that on the camera.
And it goes. They very kindly went between my tattoo. That's actually Latin for that which does not kill you can only make you stronger. And then scars there, and then this starts here, and it goes all the way, kind of.
Yeah, you can see it on the camera.
Yeah, oh my God. Goes. So that's one of 6 operations. So first of all, to save my life, and then to save my arm.
So crash theatre.
Yeah, and that's when my journey began.
Dark.
Yeah. So everything went.
So you're unconscious then.
Define unconscious. You look at somebody who's in a coma, and you imagine that they're kind of either. I'm sure most people have looked at somebody who's in a coma. I thought, I wonder what they're experiencing. Is it like being asleep, but really, really deep sleep?
Well, you hear the horror stories of people being in a coma, but they're not in a coma, and they can hear you talking to them, or people who are their eyes are open, but they appear to be like brain dead or whatever.
Yeah.
But they can hear and they can see. They just can't. They've got no control of themselves. There is something conscious there, and they're able to understand the outside world, or there's something going on internally and they're awake inside.
Yeah, so it's kind of both, I think.
It's everybody's horror story that they're in that position.
Yeah. Well, what happens with intensive care psychosis, and it's surprisingly common, people, because I got, kind of, when I found out that it was, so kind of jumping forward a few steps, when I came out of my coma and the horrendous experience that was, so I'd say I was in my coma for 5 Earth days. But I was locked in my brain for 4 weeks, having the most horrendous and vivid hallucinations that lasted for days in my head, because time warps. Time is a construct our brain makes up anyway. If you stood waiting for a bus for 10 minutes and you thought in the rain, you thought, Jesus Christ, that's a long 10 minutes, right? But then you bump into one of your mates you've not seen in ages, and you stood at the bar having a drink, and you're going, Jesus Christ, it's 11 o'clock already, where's time gone? So time is something our brain makes up in relation to our experience. So my brain made up time and warped it into 4 weeks. But in answer to the question, when I came out of the coma and I realised that all the doctors and nurses were planning on carrying out experiments on me, I was absolutely 100% convinced that was why I was there. And it wasn't helped by...
Say that again.
Oh, they were all planning on carrying out medical experiments on me. I knew that for a fact. Yeah. I was onto them. Yeah.
When you
and
came
it
out
wasn't...
of the coma?
Yeah, so when I was in intensive care...
Yeah.
Yeah. Intensive care psychosis doesn't stop when you come round. It carries on.
Right.
Okay, so...
So you 5 days in the coma, then came out of the coma, but you're still in intensive care psychosis but conscious.
Yeah.
And you thought they were out to get you.
No, I knew they were out to get me. I knew that for a fact. And it wasn't helped by the fact that this is a really rare condition, right? They've had 5 cases at the hospital. No, 4 cases in 5 years. All of them have died. So doctors were obviously curious about this and nurses. So I'm in like this bay and I'm lying there and I'm looking up and I could see doctors kind of walking past and sort of stopping and then speaking to the doctor next to them. And obviously I couldn't hear because they're between glass. And they're going, oh, that's that guy who's had necrotizing fasciitis and seems to be going to survive. Well, I was going, yeah, they're definitely planning the experiments on me right now. Yeah, swap me arms and legs over. That the kind of shit that they were doing. But yeah,
what led you to that thought? So come back to that, mate. Come back to the in the coma.
Right. So I was.
How were you tracking time so it appeared for 4 weeks when it was 5 days? What was going on in your brain?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, then, so when I was put out and I went into the operating theatre, you said, you mentioned like kind of about awarenesses of what people can hear when they're in a coma. You do have some awarenesses, right? So when I was in the operating theatre, I could hear the machines going, and I could hear the music that they were playing in the operating theatre. For those who've never, because I've worked in operating theatres, I used to work in medical sales, so I would basically go into an operating theatre as tech support for the surgeons, basically. And you see it on TV, and it's all very, very quiet and scalpel forceps. It's not like that. Yeah, it's not like that at all. They've got the radio playing and. Everyone's kind of talking, and what did it's a working environment, and I could hear some of this. And the thing while you're in the medically induced coma, what is basically happening is your body is going through an experience. In me, extreme pain, and my brain has now got to make sense of why this is happening to it. But it has to do that with very, very limited information because you're hugely sedated a lot of the time.
So you're still in pain when you're in the coma?
Oh, yeah. The pain relief that I was given did not touch it.
But they didn't know because you were in a coma?
Yeah.
What systems were you hooked up to?
Everything. I was ventilated.
Really?
Yeah. In intensive care, there was basically you get one-to-one nursing in intensive care, whether you're awake or not. So one nurse will be with you for 12 hours, and literally while I was unconscious, they had like kind of a bank of what you call drivers, which basically pump medication into you, right? And it was kind of 4 foot high drawers of drivers, all lined going into my carotid artery, going directly into my bloodstream, and basically, the nurse would come along, start at the top, replace them, work the way to the bottom, and then start again at the top, and then and go. And it would just kind of pain relief, huge amounts of intravenous antibiotics, just all the stuff that you can keep around. But because the world that I was kind of plunged into was so terrifying, my physical body was, I can go into some details about kind of the worlds I visited, and if you like, but they were so terrifying that I was, the medication that they said that they would use to sedate somebody of my weight, my BMI, is 10 units, just for ease of maths. Okay, in fact, it's not ease of maths, it was 10 units. They were giving me 32 and I still had to be physically restrained
While you're in the coma.
while I was in my coma. So the idea that I was kind of lying there very peacefully, not me. I was fighting the whole way. Yeah.
What was going on in your mind?
So I visited. Basically, I would have kind of like experiences that would last for anything from a couple of days to a number of days, and the majority of them were kind of informed by my kind of military experience. So like Bosnia and Belfast, and my time Coldstream Guards.
Yeah.
My first tour, I was part of a unit which was kind of involved with surveillance and surveillance work, close observation platoon. So we'd spend a lot of time kind of tracking terrorists, putting in OPs. We might be in an OP for 3 weeks at a time. Down in South Armagh, which back in the day we used to call Bandit Country. So I was back there.
In your head.
Yeah.
In your head, you're going through this.
But they, the volume had been turned up and the lights had been turned. So it was a warped version of a lot of that.
So like a mix of reliving some past experience, but also those experiences were on steroids and like.
Yeah. So one of the experiences I had, I was in Belfast, but I'd been separated, and this didn't happen. I'd been separated, and I could hear. I was kind of crouching behind a wall in one of the streets in Belfast that I knew very well, and I was kind of hiding there, and I could hear the crowds trying to find me.
Oh my God.
And dude, the thing that is difficult to get across is how vivid and how real it was, right? It was as real as you're sat there.
Did you know it was
that real?
Did you know it wasn't real? You thought it was
Each of these
happening.
little experiences were 100% real to me. I was in that moment. I had no memory of my previous life.
Really?
And my own experiences as Aron as a human being. I was in that moment, and those moments lasted for for days on end, some of them.
And this is your brain trying to cope with and make sense of all this pain you're going through. So am I right? And
Yeah.
manifesting situations to make it logical that you would experience it.
So a really good example is I've got an older and a younger brother. Okay, and they were basically told, you need to come down. And my older brother, had spoken to the doctor and said, do I need to get down now? Because they didn't know how bad I was, obviously. They just received a phone call. And the surgeon sort of went quiet and said, if it was my brother, I would definitely come down right now. In other words, you're probably coming down to say goodbye. So when my younger brother, my younger brother Travis, my older brother Russell, when they came to visit me, they lowered my sedation, so I had some awarenesses. So I was obviously aware that they were there, right? But I was aware that they were there and looking terrified and in pain because they're looking at me thinking that I'm going to die. So my brain says, right, okay, we need to explain this.
So your eyes were open, you could see it.
No,
You just
I had
visualised it.
awarenesses.
Yeah.
Because they would have been talking and things like that.
Yeah.
And so my brain says, okay, right, you need to explain what's going on here. Your younger brother and older brother are terrified and in pain. Right, got it. What we'll do is we will put you on a planet and we will get you and we will float you about 20 feet off the ground. And underneath you were my two brothers, okay? Naked. I mean, that's creepy enough as it is, isn't it? But then there were copies of them. So there were like 200 copies of my older and my younger brother 20 feet below me. Okay? And
What, lying down?
lying down,
Yeah.
naked.
Yeah.
It's bad enough, isn't it? And then their arms and their legs will be pulled. Like kind of you see it on the films and there's kind of
Old films,
pulled
like a
by
rack, yeah.
by horses.
Oh my God.
It was kind of like that. So the shoulder joints would be dislocated and the muscles would tear away and their arms would be pulled off and the hips would dislocate and the legs would be torn off. And then the stomachs would split open and their intestines would kind of spill out. And they were looking at me screaming as this is going on. And then the heads would kind of stretch back. And sinews of the neck would pull apart. The head would be torn off. There'd be a little puff of smoke and they'd vanish. And then a puff of smoke that'd reappear fully assembled. So I'm watching this hundreds and hundreds of times. And I was there floating for 4 days watching this, watching it get light, watching it get dark. My perception of time was as it is right now, and yeah, I spent 4 days doing that.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And it's not that uncommon. Intensive care psychosis is not that, and without getting kind of too technical, intensive care delirium and intensive care psychosis, which is slightly, there's a nuance between them, and that's kind of the subject of my second book, which I'm hoping to spend a bit more time on. And that's why I want to speak to your friend, because I'm using other people's stories in that. So, about 60 to 80% of people who are in a medically induced coma will experience some level of ITU delirium or ITU psychosis to some degree. Now, obviously, I had,
Acute.
I had very acute. And, when I was in intensive care and when I was regained consciousness, and I realised that all the doctors and nurses were planning on killing me and carrying out experiments on me. And then nobody had diagnosed it. Nobody until one night, and it was the most junior nurse. He had literally just qualified, and this was his first job. And he wrote on my notes, patient experiencing ITU delirium. And Karen was reading my notes every day. Because, yeah, she wasn't. She was just amazing through the whole thing. Yeah, to the point where when I was actually put on a ward, she banned anybody from coming into my room because I was so medically unstable. Yeah, that's another story. I'll get back to that. So yeah, she said, intensive care psychosis. So we started doing some research, and then I found out that intensive care psychosis was a thing. It's a condition. And kind of going back to, we talked earlier before we went on air about kind of life-threatening situations and how you deal with it.
Oh, the icebreaker, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, right, well, if it's a thing, I can beat it. Because I've beaten worse in my life. I've done harder stuff, sniper training, cop selection, the army. I've done tougher stuff than this. I can beat this. So that's what my brain went into fight back mode. And it wasn't an easy journey.
This is after you come out of the coma and you realised, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then when I kind of when I got back to some level of health, and I thought I'm going to write a book on this because people need to understand what this is. And originally the book was designed as a kind of for people who'd had this experience or had family, but then the book turned into something. I won't say different. It's still useful for them, but it's a very different thing. The book is kind of a book of kind of hope and how kind of the human experience and the triumph over adversity. Yeah, there's a lot more to it than it being kind of any sort of medical, novella or wrong word, a medical kind of textbook or anything like that. So I became involved with different support groups, and there's people I've spoken to online and through Zoom who were in a coma 25 years ago and are still can't leave the house because they're so emotionally damaged from what they went through.
When you come out the coma, when you were conscious again, how did your brain start reconciling what you'd experienced when you were under, and also when you mentioned about being medically unstable, how was the awake element of psychosis manifesting itself? Because when you come, I can't imagine it's you woke up, all of a sudden you're awake and you think, what, where have I been for 4 weeks? What do you mean it's only been 5 days have gone?
Yeah, because I remember one of the, when I was first brought round and Karen was there and she was mouthing to me, she's saying, you've been out for 5 days, you've been out for 5 days, whatever it was, and it's before I was brought around fully, so I think it was 4 at the time. And I was still intubated, so I couldn't speak. And I was I'm mouthing to her, apparently, 4 days, and I looked really shocked. And I thought, oh, he's lost 4 days. But I was really saying, is that all? Because I've been down here for 4 weeks, dude. It's not cool. Even though you think I've only been out for 5. You know, it's 4 weeks, definitely.
Jesus.
And then people ask me, you know, like you did, you know, how come I so sure it's 4 weeks? I know it's 4 weeks. You know what a month feels like, right? Yeah. That's what I knew a month felt like. It's just I was spending mine in, you know, alternative universes.
Yeah, well, you got that slowdown in time, or the alternative sort of perception of the passage of time. You get similar, but not bad, not dark like that. Experiences people do, I've heard, on some psychedelic drugs. So I know that you know, people will take acid, for example. I've heard this is the case. And
Allegedly,
and we'll listen to we'll go down the rabbit hole while they listen to a track, a music track, and then the track will finish. Allegedly, this has happened, and they will think they've just lived a whole different lifetime in the space of that track, and can't believe that track was only 4 minutes long. When you've been under the influence, it's like the drug. And I think when we met, we spoke about DMT, didn't we?
Yeah.
Dimethyltryptamine the body produces.
yeah,
Which the body produces, and they think that drug, that chemical drug, that chemical is responsible for the light flashing before your eyes that some people get when they are having a near-death experience. Which, and I think we mentioned it when we were talking about it when we first met. Do you know if anything like that played a part in these hallucinations?
I think absolutely it will have done.
Because you were literally, you basically near-death experience for days in the real world, 4 weeks, 4 weeks in the alternative real world in your mind.
Yeah. So my body would, you know, especially in the, you know, the initial parts where it was cushioning me for expiry, it would have been producing that. So that would have had some impact on it without doubt. But you know, also there was a huge amount of other chemicals that have been pumped into my body. There's also extreme exhaustion because people think that when you're in a coma, you're basically asleep. You're not. You know, if you measure somebody's brainwaves when they're in a coma in comparison with somebody who's awake, the brainwaves are exactly the same. So your brain is getting no rest. So if you're in a coma for 5 days, basically you've been awake for 5 days.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So, you know, there's also the element of, you know, extreme fatigue that your body's experiencing. There's the unfamiliarity with the environment, the fact that, you know, in intensive care, it's a 24/7 program. You know, there's no day and night really. You know, you've got, you know, although the lights are dimmed, and people speak a little bit quieter, the routine that the nurses follow in a night shift is pretty much the same as they would follow in a day shift. Especially with somebody like me who, you know, wasn't fed, wasn't taken to the toilet or anything like that. You know, I was cannulated. So,
how long did you stay intubated for when you came round? When you become conscious, did they have to take?
They took it out. It was they wanted to take the ventilator out immediately because it was a case of we're going to take the ventilator out, and either he's going to start breathing or he's not, and if it doesn't, we're going to have to reintubate him, and that's probably going to be it, because if I don't start breathing on my own because I was that medically ill and medically unstable, I would have gone back into a coma and they probably wouldn't have been able to bring me out of it. So I had my older brother there, Russell, and Karen was there, and I remember just sinking in it. You know, the nearest thing, the nearest kind of thing that's analogous to it is I remember it was like I was going under mud, and there was just kind of my mouth just above the mud, and I could just go, and I was just taking gasps. And I could hear in the distance my brother going, "Breathe, breathe, Aron, breathe." And he's slapping me around the face. And the doctors and nurses just kind of stood and watched, because either I'm going to start breathing or I'm fucking not. And if I don't, then I'm probably not going to come around from this. And
were you aware of this happening?
For me, I was basically, it was almost like there was a line and I was slipping underneath it, and that underneath was oblivion. It was just black, and I was. I know that was it. Yeah.
Your mind switching off.
Yeah, and I, you know, and then I just heard this my brother's voice in the distance, and he would slap me, encouraging me to breathe. And I started taking some gasps, and I started breathing on my own.
Holy shit! What if he hadn't have been there doing that?
I'm sure Karen would have stepped in. If they'd, I'm convinced that if they'd have done it when there wasn't anyone there, I'm 100% convinced I would have died, because it was so seductive, that inky blackness. It is so nice and so welcoming.
Oh, really? So
yeah, and it isn't like a euphoric, oh, I'm going to heaven. It's just when you are so exhausted and you've had so much pain for so long, 4 weeks. Because when I was in these universities, the pain in my arm was with me the whole time. And when you're so exhausted and you just want it to stop, man, you just want it to stop, and you feel yourself sinking, and you just think, and you know that when you go under there, everything's going to be all right. Everything's gone.
Because as you're
that is so seductive.
So as you're, I wonder what that is, because that's, you're losing connection to your physical self, aren't you? So that's basically, as you're sinking down. The way I'm thinking about this, as you're sinking down, your brain is like switching off the systems one by one. The deeper you go, system off. Don't have to worry about that pain anymore. Don't have to worry about this pain anymore. Down, so there's nothing.
Yeah.
But then you are nothing if you let yourself go.
Yeah.
Holy shit! I've never heard it explained like that before.
That is literally what it was.
My God. Yeah. Because people talk about light, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, being drawn to...
I've done quite a lot of reading on the whole near-death experience thing, yeah. I didn't get any of that.
How does it compare to stuff you've read, what you experienced then?
I mean, I'm not here to slam people's kind of personal, religious views or whatever. That's not what I'm about at all. But I can, I'm going to. But you're all wrong, by the way. No. Because I think a lot of times it gets put down to kind of religious experience. They embrace the light and they see this, and the family. But when you look at it in a global context, I think people's near-death experiences nearly all map with their cultural norms. So somebody who has a near-death experience from a completely different culture to us, then if that was us moving to the next level, for just so I can be fairly diplomatic, then they would be uniform. They would have to be the same, because we are all moving on. People from a different don't go to a different heaven, presumably. So yeah, or maybe I'm just an evil person. I was actually going to hell. We can't rule that out, can we? There's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's probably what's going to happen. I used to joke that at least it'd be warm and I'll know people, but it wasn't warm. It was fucking dark and there was nobody there.
When you were breathing for yourself and you were able to speak again, how did you explain to Karen, or to the people around you and the docs, what you'd been through?
I remember when Karen had said to me, "You've been out for 4 days," at the time I think it was, because I kind of went back under again, and I kind of mouthed 4 days. It won't work on. I mouthed 4 days, and then I mouthed, I was terrified. That's all I could get out, because my brain was just trying to make sense of all of these little vignettes of experience that I'd gone through. It's trying to, understand what they were to start off with, and then I've got the whole, paranoia about, everybody, in the ITU, it took me a while before I could kind of make sense of it. And the way I started to try and make sense of it, I tried writing it down. Well, I did write it down, and I just wanted to write it down because I just thought it might be cathartic, and it's eventually what became of the book. And in the book I describe, into some might say quite shocking detail, some of the places that I visited. But there are to this day, as much peace as I've made of it. Now, if I could turn, I would not have had what happened to me, because it changed me as a human being. In so much as I have stared into the abyss of my soul, if you have one, and I know myself better than most human beings ever will through what I've experienced. So I would not have that happen again. But there are still some experiences and some of that 4 weeks that even to this day I cannot talk about it. And if you read the book, some of them are fucking terrifying. You're like, what were those others like? But I still, I've not talked about Karen, not talked to any of my therapists when I was out. I couldn't talk about.
But you've put them in the book.
Some of them.
Yeah.
There's some of them that I could not.
Yeah.
I still couldn't put in there, and I still haven't.
Why do you, when you say you know yourself better having done it, is that because the things you experienced when you were under, in a similar way to what Nietzsche thinks about dreams, right? Is it because in trying to understand why certain things were in your head when you were thinking, what populated that 4 weeks basically? Like,
Yeah.
Was it because you were trying to understand why those certain things present themselves? Maybe there was something in the real world that you weren't okay with or didn't understand, or
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit that I talk about, kind of some,
like your brother's is a crazy one.
Yeah. And I think like most soldiers, kind of stuff that we've seen and done, or seen and not done. I carried about quite a lot of guilt for a lot of years, and it made me face up to that in a horrific and very stark experience, a very stark and frightening way. It made me kind of realise that I was carrying a lot of guilt around, which was then unpacked in therapy afterwards. And that's how. But I think it's multifaceted, really. I think because if to have gone through the pain that I did for a start off teaches you a lot about yourself. To be able to go through an experience like that and come back from it teaches you a lot about yourself. But the actual experience in and of itself, to know and to have seen, what your brain is capable of doing to you, that is a learning experience that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. To know that, basically how dark your brain actually can be if it's given the right circumstances, the right opportunity, and very probably the right medications. To know what's deep down inside, what your brain is capable of manifesting. That's knowing yourself.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I've spoken before about nothing compared to what you went through, but in mental ill health in the past, and one of the things I try and explain to people who are in the situation at their worst, at their darkest, which I'm thankful to say, close friends has only been, as in close friends who are still around, only been a couple of times I've had the opportunity to speak to, and they're really at their worst. It's like when you're in that position, really not well, your mind will play tricks on you. I'm talking about depression and anxiety and
absolutely.
Your mind will lie to you. You will not interpret things the way you should normally do. This is the classic: everything's shit. Luck is never in your favour. Everything's always bad. Nothing ever goes your way. I mean, that's one of those attitudes. But that's sort of the start of it. And as you go down, you never see any right in anything, and you ends up getting to the point where, let's think about depression and why people get to suicide. And you think people choose suicide because their brain partly has told them that is the best option, and there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else you can help yourself, which is utter lies. But it's your brain telling you that, and your brain allows you to get that situation where it's suicide, and there's no other option. Which is how I sort of understood what you were saying there.
If you imagine kind of
your brain took you to another level in terms of darkness, which is just wild.
Well, if you think of like kind of the human experience, and so if what you're let's call it the narrative that your brain is having with yourself because the stories we tell ourselves is not actually us, right? You know, I mean, that's a story that, because if that was the case, then who's telling that story? So then we're getting a bit of a circular argument. So our brain, you know, for good or bad, can manifest a story. So if we think about somebody who's really healthy, you know, in not a bad place, you know, going to work every day, etc., at one end of the spectrum, and then if you put my experience at the other end of the spectrum, right? So my brain was telling me and showing me this stuff. But if you think of somebody who's in a normal, you know, just walking down the street or going to work, and the stories that the average person tells themselves, you know, the average person has a conversation with themselves, and the stuff that the average person says about, you know, if you spoke to one of your friends the way you speak to yourself in your own head, your friends would fucking abandon you. Who is harder on you as an individual? Nobody other than yourself. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not, you know, focused enough. I'm too focused. I'm working too hard. You know, we do that on a daily basis. And we do it even when you're healthy to such an extent that, you know, we wouldn't tolerate anyone speaking to us the way we do ourselves, because we know our own weaknesses. We know the chinks in our own armour. And then if you roll that forward to, you know, what you're talking about there, somebody with mental health problems, if you're experiencing mental health, there is no one who knows you better than yourself. There is no one that can find those weaknesses and knows where to stick that knife and twist it, and the lies that it can tell you than anybody could. So it's not a far leap from that to understand that, you know, mental illness is something when people are suffering from depression and, you know, suicidal tendencies and things like that, they're buying into a narrative that their own brain is telling them, and mine was just an extreme version of that. In glorious Technicolor and high definition, with the constant,
thanks to the flesh-eating superbug,
and sepsis, and you know, and I also had a soundtrack playing in my head the full time.
What do you mean?
Oh, that's a spoiler. I can't tell that story, man. That's like kind of the end of the book. Yeah.
Okay, but let's music.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness me.
So I'm not going to say what it was, because that was, you know,
fine,
that's a spoiler. But I had a 15 second, and if not even that, probably about a 10-second clip of a really cheesy pop song and a real grating part of it, and it was played on loop for 4 weeks solid, and it did not stop. Now sometimes it would be just in the background, and sometimes it'd go and it was stretched, and sometimes it'd go it'd be really fast, but it was there the whole time. And sometimes it was so fucking loud, man, that it hurt my ears.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. And I hear that song now on the radio every now and then. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's in the book.
When you hear about what you're talking about there, it makes me think and understand exactly how you get crazy people walking around, and they're walking around. They're on a different planet. They're mad, as in they're like medically, clinically.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with them. You know, the people who run around and walk around. There used to be a guy when I was growing up, and walk around by the school I went to. Always have his fingers in his ears, walking always his fingers in his ears. He always looked anxious and always looked worried, walking around. He wasn't well. He didn't look well. He didn't look homeless, but he didn't look well off. He looked sick the way he was walking about. And you think about someone like that, you think, there's something going on in their mind that is so far removed from what reality is. So far removed from what reality is, and yet either no one understands it or no one is able to deal with it. Or he isn't presenting himself to have it dealt with. You know, and you could, like, tie that in with the mental health, but you take it all forward to what you experienced. But for you, there was no getting away from it. No getting away from it whatsoever. No. And so many different angles. Music, the visuals, the pain, the external stuff that you could hear going on from the docs in your family. Oh my God. Oh my goodness me. How long did it take you to get over that when you came out? How long did the therapy go on for? Two different questions there. Two different questions.
Yeah. I mean, define getting over it. I mean, I've never gotten over it to the point that they're still there, and I think about it every day. The experiences, and I call them experiences rather than nightmares or dreams, because they're as real. You know, an experience, a dream. You see something happen, right, and you're there,
Yeah.
right. An experience, you feel it in the same way I can feel this table, you know, and I can see you across the table, and you know, and this is an experience. I can experience, you know, my backside on the chair, and I can feel the temperature in the room. They were experiences in exactly that way, but you know, frankly, fucking horrific. So experiences are different, and they are burned into my memory. It's like they've not faded at all. You know, I can.
When did this happen? What year?
This is 5 years ago.
Not long. But still.
Yeah, they
They
are burnt in my. I will never forget them. I'll never forget them. And in a weird way, I don't want to. You know, I wear my scar as like kind of a, almost like a medal for going to that dark place, or a, what do you when you're a souvenir? A souvenir from going to that dark place, and it's made me, you know, in answer to your question, I think to get myself certainly where I could work properly, you know, because I was supposed to take, I don't know, they reckon that if you've been in intensive care, you should take a month off for every day. So I should have taken 5 months off. Oh no, I went back to work like days after coming out of hospital. That was a huge mistake. I could not function.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did you make that decision?
Because I'm obstinate and yeah, I just and I, you know, it was a coping mechanism as well, I think. Because if you don't, then you've got to admit that you're really, really ill, and it's going to take longer to recover. So, yeah. I think probably to be fully functioning was probably about 6 to 9 months, really, if I'm honest. Yeah.
What was different about you? What's different about you now than when it was before? Obviously, you've got a very different outlook on life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got, I think I'm a more understanding person. I'm certainly more compassionate. I've got more time for people.
Why? Why did that change come about?
Because I understand the fragility of the human experience, I think. And I'm, you know, if somebody's going through something, then I find it easier. Although their experience is maybe completely different from what my experience was, I find it easier. I can connect with people who've got a problem. Now, it doesn't mean to say that I'm any sort of saint, and you know, by any stretch of imagination, any sort of therapist, or I'm not. But if you know, if you catch me on the right day and you tell me you're going through problems, I'm you know, quite good at listening now, which I wasn't terribly good at before. It's certainly knocked the arrogance out of me that I was often accused of before. And I'm much happier and I think the big one is I'm much more comfortable with myself. And I think when you've had your everything about you stripped down to nothing, then you understand yourself a little bit better. You understand, you know, when you've had all your, you know, kind of your certainties taken away from you, and you've been exposed of how kind of weak we are as a creature. That, in a bizarre way, is very liberating. I think I know myself better than most people because I know what I know what I can endure. I mean, and I always had an idea because I mean we've been, you know, similar experiences in the military and similar courses and things like that. So you know, you do something like sniper selection, and you know, I reference that in the book because I think all of those were things that probably are part of the reason why I came through the other side, because I had a certain amount of, you know, resilience built into me that was kind of, you know, beaten into me from my time in the military. Now, although the military informed some of my experiences in that, you know, they were basically, you know, they were twisted and served to me as a, you know, an experience. I think the resilience that I built up in the military, I think kind of my ability to deal with hardship helped me get through it. And when you come away from something like that, you fuck man, if I can deal with that, there's nothing I can't deal with.
Are you're not fearful at all that your brain could turn you and do something like that to you again now that you've experienced it once so horrific? Because most people will never experience anything like you have inside their own mind. They just won't. They just won't.
No, and I hope not.
99.99999% of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I remember when I was taken from intensive care and I was put on a medical ward, and this is when Karen just kind of went in a overdrive, man. I mean, when I was taken out on the normal ward, she's like stood outside my room and said, right, unless you are actually if you're actually treating Aron, you are not allowed in the room, because I was so medically unstable. My immune system was just, I had like some wooden white blood cell, and that was in crutches.
Is that because
and she was terrified of me getting an hospital-borne infection, because it would have killed me.
Is it the superbug that destroyed the white blood cells?
Yeah,
your immune system.
Yeah, and the sepsis. So my immune system had obviously been fighting for however long I was in. I can't remember how long in intensive care. I think I probably stayed. There's the 5 days, but then there was probably about a week or two before I was transferred to a medical ward. I was stable enough. So they knew my immune system was totally shot at this point, just exhausted. So if I'd caught an hospital-borne infection, and they were doing the rounds at the hospital at the time, so she basically said no one's allowed in his room unless they're actually coming in to administer treatment. And like the nurses were like, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, who's going to clean his room? What about food? And she's like, well, I'm going to bring this food in every day. And she came in every morning. Fortunately, she's a teacher, and this happened, the summer holidays. But she would come in at visiting time with like a Bergen full of my meals for the day, water for the day, so I didn't have to drink hospital water. And she'd come, like a Sherpa down the corridor. And yeah, so I'd given all that, and I was starting to recover. It was like 5 days in or something. I've been on the ward for maybe 5 days, and while she was there, the consultant came round and he was doing his rounds, and he just sort of, bear in mind that my arm was kind of like Frankenstein stitches, because it still wasn't fully closed. It closed in most parts, and he sort of looked at my wrist and he said, "What's that?" There was a little red kind of lump, and he kind of drew a line around it, and then he picked up his phone and went, "Yeah, we need him back in theatres."
Oh no!
And her thought was, because I literally just proposed to her, by the way.
After the coma.
Yeah, I made a wedding ring out of my hospital wristband. I'd literally just proposed to her, so she thought that that I've just proposed to her and now I'm going to die. And I was thinking, I could be going back to the dark place. That's not cool.
Oh my God.
So when I was taken down there and, I was sedated, I thought I could be going back to the dark place. But I went to another place which is, different but equally terrifying. I basically tumbled into oblivion.
So what was it on your wrist?
It was the infection had come back.
What, the flesh-eating superbug?
Yeah, so that's wash it all out, scrape away some flesh, and stitch me back up, and pack the wounds.
How long were you under that time for?
That's like the duration of the procedure.
Oh, okay.
But again, which was probably it was the best part of a day, I think, because Karen was like kind of sat upstairs the whole time. But for me, yeah, I kind of went in another place for. I can't perceive of time in that, because it was a real weird experience.
Was it anaesthetic that gave you then to put you under that time?
Well, no, because generally, have you ever had an operation?
No.
Right. Okay. Well, if you have an operation, basically you're lying there, you go 5, or say count back from 10.
I've been put under.
Yeah. So 10, 9, 8, so, and you go out, and then you open your eyes and you're in recovery. No, not for me.
Right.
Not for me. I had that, countdown from 10, and then eyes closed, and then I was in oblivion, and I felt like I was just in another universe. It's very,
What were you saying?
nothing. I
Really?
felt nothing. I was just an entity, and I thought, this is oblivion, and there is nothing. One of the chapters in the book when I talk about it, I managed to put it into words, but for brevity, just understand that it was. I had no consciousness of myself. I wasn't Aron. I was just an entity in oblivion, staring into oblivion. And I thought that this was it forever. And I had no concept of time. So I don't know how long that lasted. It felt, I don't know. It was just impossible to understand that one.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing what the brain can do.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody, I think, allegedly, who's done hallucinogens, who's done psychedelics, has an idea of kind of what the mind is able to do, either positively or negatively. But yeah, that was certainly an experience.
Have you ever felt anything as disconnected or disassociative, if you like, or otherworldly since those experiences in any other way? Like you talked about meditation, and anything else? Have you had any operations since? I think it comes close in terms of how different it was to reality. Or to the physical reality, I should say.
I had a very minor operation where I was put out a couple of years ago, and before I was thinking, because I didn't think I was going to be given a general. I thought I was going to be getting a local. And when they said I was going to general, I thought, holy crap. And I didn't. I had that, countdown to 7, and then I woke up in recovery, nothing. I don't know. So I suppose meditation gives me a more positive experience of getting away from self than anything else. But nothing to to that extent by any stretch of the imagination.
Have you had much discussions with? I know you're talking about you are doing another book. Have you had much discussions with other people who've experienced intensive care psychosis?
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot.
What have those discussions been like?
So varied,
Really?
so varied, and a lot of the time, I think it was kind of, I think because the medical establishment doesn't really understand it and certainly doesn't deal with it well. So a couple of examples. There was a woman I was chatting to online, and she was in, I'm not going to mention it for possibly legal reasons, but she was in a big teaching hospital in America in a major city. Think major city in America. She was in one of the top teaching hospitals there. And when she came out of the coma, she was saying, I saw this and this is what happened. So it would be me saying, I saw my brother's been there and this, and I was in Belfast and Bosnia and yada, yada, yada. The nurse said to her, I think you're possessed by the devil. You should pray for forgiveness. This is somebody who's just come out of a coma, been told you're possessed by the devil. You need to pray. That's unfucking real. Yeah. So that's one experience. And then I've had everything in between. People who've had good therapy, bad therapy. I'm in contact with support groups. I think the theme that I've kind of come to recognise is that few people completely get over it, and that's one thing that I won't say troubles me. It more baffles me in that this happened to me, and I appear to have, apart from, I would say things that's improved about me and made me better, a better person. I don't, and I'll never forget it, but I don't have any negative repercussions of it. I think the opposite is true. And there's a lot of people who still really struggle and still really suffer. But I mean, I was fast-tracked to therapy, and I had the most amazing therapist.
Had the therapist had experience of someone who'd fallen victim to this before or not?
No, but he did have experience of dealing with military, so it did. He was really good with PTSD, which essentially is what this is. And I do have a bit of a history of that as well. I've been treated for PTSD in the past, so he was. We were on the same page in that, and his treatment's amazing. And because I'm a veteran, I was fast tracked. Whereas I know people, and I know of people who've waited months and months and months before they've had any sort of help. And then the help that they've had has been wildly varied, from really good to, frankly, making it worse.
Yeah. Well, you say you haven't had any negative experience from it. I don't know. I disagree. When there's things that you can't talk about, you won't talk about. You can't bring yourself to be comfortable talking about. That cannot be positive.
Well, it's not like. Okay, so I mean, things that you experience in, we'll use the military because it's a good example. So the things that you see and do or don't do in the military, and you take that experience away, and kind of the damage that you'll experience psychologically is when you take that experience, you don't talk about it, and you kind of squash it down. Because who knew that taking, emotions and squashing them right down inside your body and pretending that they never happened and forgetting about them forever is not a good thing. Who knew? Well, apparently everyone nowadays in the modern like that. It's not that I'm doing that with them. It's just that I've kind of dealt with them myself.
Oh, okay.
And I don't. I don't see the utility in. I didn't. Certainly, I didn't want the book to be that. That's not the book I wanted to write. It's graphic enough and it's horrific enough without me putting these kind of things in that, I don't want it to be a book that, that gives people nightmares. Yeah. And I've dealt with them. I've emotionally compartmentalized them. And I've dealt with them myself. It's not like they've not been dealt with. I have. I just don't see the utility in exposing my family and my loved ones to it.
Yeah.
And certainly if they're in a book, because some of them involve my family.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be I don't see the value in that. First of all, for their experience.
That makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. So how is the second book is going to have the experiences of other people who've experienced? Yeah,
I've started it, and there's been a big kind of stall because I'm working on other projects. So originally, the follow-up book, what I wanted it to be is like kind of, so there's my experience from point A to point Z of going through, the cut on my hand, the A&E experience, the being induced, the experience that I had while I was in the operating theatre, the coming through the different experiences while I was in a coma, the experience of being brought round and forced to breathe for myself, and the recovery period, and all that. That was my journey from A to Z. What I wanted to write is other people's journeys. So a couple of different people's experience of, immediately before what took them into that environment, a couple of people's experience of being sedated and been in the operating theatre, whether they see the white light and etc., whatever it is, because we're all different and we all have different experiences. And through the journey, I wanted to use other people's stories, and I started off with that. And I'm in contact with quite a senior, she's called Kelly Deaton, and she's an intensive care specialist in America. And she's kind of cited my experience and used a video of mine as a talking head at conferences and things like that, and talks that she does for intensive care work over in America. And she's kind of getting involved as a she's putting some input into it. So it will be other people's, when I get around to finishing it, will be other people's experiences, but there'll also be this is why the experience, this is what's happening to that person medically, and this is why they're experiencing that. So, the drugs that they're given, the explanation, because my book reads more like I won't use the it's quite light on medicalisation. I don't go into any kind of medical detail really. If you want to know somebody's experience of being in a coma, that's the book for you. But if you want to understand the experience, it's the book for you. If you like a good story, it's the book for you. But if you want a medical explanation of a coma, you're not going to get it.
Why did you call that book Never Really Over?
Oh, that's the thing, you see. You have to read the book to find out.
Really? Okay. I am going to read the book. Like I said, normally, for the most part, I'll if I know something's going on as an author, I'll read at least one of the things they've done. But in this case, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to know about the experiences before we chatted about it.
I think it's worth if it's only use to you. I think it's really.
I'm going to read it. Oh, for sure, going to read it.
Oh no! I mean, I think it's really worked well because a lot of the times, I've done a number of podcasts, and a lot of times they have read it and they really understand it, and the conversation's gone in a very different direction because they understand certain parts of it. So I think it's probably I think it's made for a richer conversation. The fact that you hadn't. Than if you had have done.
Oh, cool. Good. I'm glad it's working out for you so far.
Yeah.
So how common is it, like per capita, for people to experience intensive care psychosis? Do you know? Do you have any figures for it?
Yeah. So anything between sort of 60 and 80% of people who are put in a medically induced coma. Huge.
Jesus.
Yeah. 60 to 80% will experience some level of intensive care.
And yet you don't really.
Well, it's the delirium that they're actually experiencing at the time. The psychosis kind of. We won't get into the minutiae between the two, but we'll have similar experiences. Yeah.
So if it's that high, why is it so not well understood then? Like you thought 5 years ago, I think 2018, and you're saying that it took a junior doctor to think about it to put in your
junior nurse,
not a doctor, junior nurse. Yeah.
I used to, when I left my first degree was physiotherapy, and I worked on intensive care units, and I'd never heard of it. No one, and I think part of the problem is because everybody's experience is so different. They can't look for, these are the signs, these are the symptoms. It's very difficult for them to do that because we're all so individual. And I think rather than trying to connect the dots in terms of, instead of looking at it and saying, all right, everyone's so different, they should just look at the similarities. And the similarities are the delusions, the hallucinations, and kind of the emotional trauma, because the reason why they need to understand it, I think, is because it would make them much more sympathetic when you come out of your coma and you're not being a terribly helpful person. Because I could have been, I know I was a bit of a pain in the arse when I was put on the medical ward, but you've got to understand that I was fearing for my life, literally. So I probably wasn't a great person to have the nurse.
Why did you think they wanted to do experiments on you?
Because my brain was still struggling to understand the world
that you just come from.
Yeah.
Oh, that you're in. Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it for lots of other things as well that were really troubling. That anything from the more, or they don't give a shit if you live or die, and stuff like that. So it wasn't the whole time. That those kind of emotions were kind of waxed and waned. They weren't with me. The whole time. But then there's the afterwards, people who've had this experience, and people, generally who are put in a medical journal and don't have those kind of experience will suffer experiences afterwards that are more medically diagnosable, exhaustion, memory problems, coordination. There's a whole raft of problems that people who have had this experience will have, which are more medical. I mean, they may have a psychological root as their experience. Two weird things, though. I have to mention this that's happened to me. When I came out of the coma, I've always had 20/20 vision, perfect. Came out of the coma, anything between my hand and my face. I can't even send a text without glasses. Yeah, and they put that down to the oxygen's kind of forced into your body. The pressure of the oxygen when you've been ventilated. But the weirdest one is I've lost the ability to spell out loud. Right?
What?
Right. So if you say to me, you know, write never really over, I could write it down on a piece of paper, not a problem. Right? But then if you to ask me to spell it out loud, cannot do it. I cannot spell out loud. I have to really concentrate to spell my own name out loud.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't spell out loud. It's the
That is
weirdest
crazy,
thing,
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard, you know, various things from different people who had the experience. There's some real commonalities, exhaustion. I mean, some people, you know, never return to work again
I can
because
imagine.
they're so physically frail and emotionally traumatized. You know, I've had everything from, you know, people suffering from depression to cannot leave the house to suicides.
I can imagine. I mean, and especially with the hallucinations and everything, I can imagine how people who would maybe have a little bit less resilience in certain aspects could experience a hallucination of something, family member, non-family member, like, but a visual. I mean, you described like describing that about your brothers. I can imagine how other people who experience that could never get over that.
Yeah.
It's so horrific for them to, you know, just popping into their brain every so often and thinking about it years down the line. But such a horrific, because it is a horrific vision, a horrific scene that you're describing that you absolutely lived. That people, because you know as well as I do, it's like you talk about PTSD, and people deal with trauma in different ways, and some people can experience a huge amount of things that would be extremely traumatic to others, but they just brush it off the shoulder. And they like, look how many people you went and served with, you know. In the past, you mentioned you've had treatment for PTSD before, and there are other people who have PTSD, and they've been on the same missions or operations, been in the same exact situation, maybe 30 people, maybe 10 people, maybe 5 people, 1 or 2 of them come with PTSD, most of the others won't. It's just, I'm just highlighting that people deal with things in different ways. So I can see how someone going through what you went through, they ain't coming out the other side. They're never going back to work. They're never leaving the house because they're traumatized for life, and no amount of therapy is going to get over it because their brain is just not built to deal with it.
Yeah.
Built to deal with it. And it's just the way it is, unfortunately. Fucking horrific, man.
No, I don't know. I don't know whether my. I mean, I know there were certainly some things, and I talk about it in the book, like kind of the weirdest things that I think I found that helped me, and it was, you know, the routine that the time I'd spent in OPs, and the routine of it. You know, For those listeners who are not military, don't know what an OP is. An OP is an observation post. So you would be you'd be surveilling the target at the front end. You were there with your optics and your listening devices, and then you would move into an admin position where you were cleaning weapons or whatever it was,
taking
food
turns
in,
on the shop.
And then you go to the back position where you was back cover, so you'd be lying there with the GPMG. Covering, if you were attacked from the rear, and then you move into a sleeping position, and then you would go back, and that kind of routine was I just felt that being able to cope with the intensive care routine of kind of lying there, medication, washing, that. I just got a sense that prepared me for that, bizarrely. And there's other things, my mental resilience, my ability to deal with hardship. Now, I don't know, because there's no control group, that whether the fact that I'd been in the army meant that I could deal with it better, or whether the type of person that I was that joined the army and did the stuff that I did. Because there's no control group, so it's an unanswerable question. Which is right? Whether I would have been able to cope with it anyway, or whether the experiences that we shared, would have meant that I could have dealt with it. I don't know. Is the answer to that?
So going back to the routine, that is interesting. So in the hospital, you had the real world, the physical real. I don't want to say the real world, because in your mind it was equally as real.
Yeah.
The physical real world going around you, the routine of in the morning, whatever one in the morning, like cleaning, antibiotics, medication getting redone. There were certain things that were bang, bang, bang through the day and through the night, but even though it was craziness in your mind, so you think that familiarity of routine, that was something you could cling to as, I recognise this.
I'm
There's
100%.
something normal there, and that linked back to your routine within the military for the OP, for example.
I'm 100% convinced.
Really?
I'm 100% convinced, because my mind kept, and it wasn't just the kind of flashbacks that I was having to that. It was just the routine felt almost comforting to me. I can deal with routine, you know. It was something that I'm familiar with in a world of total. You imagine, okay, you strip every single facet of you as a human being away. You know, your emotions, your experiences, your likes, your dislikes, your prejudices, everything. You take that away and you drop you into a new world, in a new reality that is absolutely 100% real to you, and you know no different. Okay? But having something in the background that you know that you've got, and I wasn't at the time thinking, oh shit, this is just like being in a Royal OP in South Armagh. It wasn't like that. It's just the routine. I just had an intrinsic feel, I've done this before. Routine, I'm good at. It's hard. And for those who don't know, I've been in a Royal OP for 3 weeks at a time. It's fucking hard. You know, pissing in bottles and shitting in cling film bags, and you know, eating cold food and lying in mud for 3 weeks at a time, and all that is a hard routine, and that's what we call it.
And constantly under threat.
Yeah, we call that hard routine. And the hard routine that the intensive care environment felt familiar. I've done hard routine before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. A routine, I mean, in a different way, like routine is something that most people take for granted, but it's such an essential part of getting through life. You strip away people's routine, they don't know where they are. But most people don't even think about it, you know. Obviously, that's a different type of thing, but yeah. Goodness me. What's the plan for the second book? How far progressed is that?
I'm probably about a third into it, but other projects that I'm working on at the minute have kind of superseded in it, you know, that I know are going to kind of that needed to get finished first. I'm wanting. We're going to Scotland next month, and I'm hoping to get spend a couple of days. We've got, you know, my cousin's got a little place up on the coast. She's very kindly let us go and stay up there, so I'm hoping I can at least thrash out some ideas. But I'm hoping to have something like that's ready to start looking at getting edited by the end of the year.
Okay, pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, I've been at it a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
yeah. Oh no, it's not. Yeah, that's kind of thrown out. But it's yeah, it takes its time. Well, you know yourself.
Yeah, and that's the second book. So, but you mentioned a third. What's the third?
Oh, that's completely different.
Go on.
I want to write a kind of history of military slang through the years. And I know military slang's been done before, but I want to do it through different, like from the Romans, the words that they would use. So a little bit about the different campaigns. Not a military history book by any stretch of the imagination, but where, you know, these words came from. You know, so the different campaigns, you know, so you know, what would let's use the word, you know, enemy. Okay, you know, what Romans would have used for the different enemies that they had. What, you know, the Napoleonic British soldiers would call the French. What the French would call the British. You know, the Falklands. You know, Northern Ireland, all the way through, and then the different services.
I've got a book up there called Jack Speak, which a good friend gave to me. Gav Chewat gave to me, full of sailor slang.
Yes.
My God, they're on a different fucking planet. That lot.
Yeah,
Planet, mate. Yeah.
I've got a lot of mates who are Royal Marines, and it's quite, you know, it's quite interesting when you speak to people from different units, and there's similarities that if you were a civilian and you were to listen, you wouldn't get the nuance. but you know, I'm Guards and you were Paras, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of similarities that we would use, but then there's words which I could pick out that were different. And then, like, when I was in the Coldstream Guards, I was 2nd Battalion, and there's some words that we would use that the 1st Battalion wouldn't, and vice versa. And, you know, so if anyone's out there, you know, Remembrance Sunday is closing on us fast. So if anyone out there is planning on going to Remembrance Sunday and pretending to be ex-military, please don't, because within 30 seconds of you opening your mouth, we know you're a fucking Walter, we know you're bullshitting. Within 30 seconds of you speaking, because you're going to say a word that would be incongruent with the unit you said that you were in, and we're going to look at it and we're like, really?
Yeah. Bang on. Well, listen, mate, it's been an absolute...
No, thanks for...
It's been a pleasure. It's been... Most of it, I have enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoy listening to people's experiences of the human experience, especially when it's in your own mind, and especially when it's so different, so rare compared to other people have experienced. Because it does. I think stories like yours and your interpretation of what happened to you and how you deal with that.
Yeah,
you know, how you reconcile it, how you understand it, and how you apply it into your life now. They help inform other people to improve. I think that's what I believe. Anyway,
absolutely. I mean, I listen, to a lot of podcasts, and you know, they have guests on who, you know, their politics can be diametrically opposed to mine, but you know, you always learn something, and I think you know that exposing yourself. And because it's so easy to fall into an echo chamber now, so listening to something a bit diverse. But yeah, Never Really Over, available on Amazon.
Is there an audiobook?
No, I'm working on it, but one of my best mates, Joe Marshall, he will be listening to this. He started doing the prologue, and I'm really, I said to you before we start, I'm really uncomfortable. Not really uncomfortable about my voice, but I don't think it sounds great on when recorded and played back. It's slightly nasally and a little bit camp, I think. But anyway,
I think it's fine to me.
Joe has got a really rich but northern voice, and he's done some voiceover work for adverts that I've got. You know, he's done for me in the past, and he did the prologue, and it was just amazing. It's just that he's so busy on other projects because he's a bit of a creative, and he just drives you mad. He's so musician, he's so talented, it makes you sick. But yeah, trying to get him to pin him down to listen to get it done is impossible. So it will be eventually. So yeah, Never Really Over, Aron Welsh, available on Amazon. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I am on Instagram, and it's Active Aron, all one word. I'd love to get some feedback from the book, if anyone reads it, and also if you've had similar experiences, it would be amazing if you could, reach out to me. But one person left a review for the book and said Karen is the real hero of this story. That pissed me off a little bit. She was an absolute hero, but the hero of the story, I'm not having that. Really, come on. It's been an absolute pleasure coming up and speaking to you, man. It's been great.
I'll connect you up with Paul Cretella, who's the other guy I mentioned at the start.
Yeah, would you? That'd be fantastic.
You're on Instagram, aren't you?
Yeah. Active Aron.
I'll connect you up with him. And good luck, buddy. And I'm looking forward to reading the book for sure.
Fantastic.
And if you change your mind about recording it yourself, you're welcome to use the studio to do it.
Let's chat about that.
After. So Liz McConaughey, she's just done her book, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because part of the problem, I think, why my voice sounds so nasally and campy is because I'm doing, I don't have the recording version.
There's nothing wrong with your voice.
And there's nothing wrong with being camp, by the way. It's just it doesn't play well. It doesn't play well with some of the things I'm describing. You know, when I'm talking about sniper selection, and me and my mate Polly being dragged across the hills. It's my nasally voice doesn't really work well.
Cool. Cheers for your time, buddy.
Thanks very much.
No worries.